Hi, welcome. I just need to sit down for a minute. I forgot some things, so I had to rush a little bit. Let's see who we have. Oh, Ariana, you're here. That's great. Who's on vacation in Poland. Yeah, that's really cool. Great. So welcome. It's been 2 weeks. We skipped 1 week. This is usually my face camera, but for today I'm gonna turn it towards my palette. Normally I have my palette here next to my working surface, but I'm gonna be adding quite a bit of water to my paint, and that's gonna drip down. I don't like working flat on a table, so I'm gonna get in your face now and turn my camera down. Let's see. Okay. All right, that looks good. It's been a while since I worked with acrylics. So yeah, I'm using acrylics today. I thought about this artwork that we're doing is actually watercolor and gouache, but I don't own any gouache, and I am not very good with watercolor. So I thought I would use acrylics as watercolor, which may be a little bit of cheating, but I'm here for that. So I have burnt umber. I think I said raw umber in the description, but I don't have, or I can't find my raw umber. So burnt umber. This is phthalo blue. Pyrrole red. Yeah. Hansa yellow and titanium white. They're all golden open colors for no other reason than it's what I have. So I don't think it's gonna matter a whole lot. All right, I'm just gonna change my stool to here. All right, so oops, sorry about that. All right. I chose this portrait because I like the style, and I'm in a little bit of a dilemma sometimes between, you know, wanting to explore color, and at the same time, when you're researching, you fall into these kind of Wikipedia holes, rabbit holes, where you know, you read so much and you kind of want to talk about all that information, but you can't really, or at least I can't really study color and at the same time study art history because I'm not proficient in either. So my brain started to overheat a little bit. So I tried to limit my reading for this week a little bit. And I have no idea. Does she do a sketch? I'm not sure, but I decided let's not do that and let's just do a little bit of a sketchy underpainting with some gray. Just so you know, burnt umber and phthalo blue make this really nice range of grays. Same for ultramarine blue, by the way. All right, so yeah, let's get some basic. I have a little bit of a shadow thing going on here. The sun is still out there. And it's been a while since I painted on white paper. Okay. Ariana says, I think she sketches with a dry brush. Yeah, it does look like it. Well, I'm gonna sketch with a wet brush. How about that? I cannot put down sketches and talk at the same time, so just give me a minute. I'll put some of these. It's a little bit dark, isn't it? All right, then we have this, well, it's probably a hat of some kind, which is very typically like a watercolor blob. So let's not put any lines in there. Then here and here. That should be enough, probably. Right. So what I found interesting about this portrait is there's this nice marriage between some of the yellow and some of the blue. creating this really summery light. Like the image to me says this woman is outside on a summer day, and I find it really remarkable how a couple of color choices can relay that information. And that's when you kind of, if you read her Wikipedia page, you will inevitably click on a bunch of impressionists that she associated with. And her later style was also considered part of the Impressionist era. And I know that Impressionism is a very broad term. Like, it doesn't necessarily dictate that you need to use certain colors, etc., etc. Elizabeth says Renoir vibes. Yeah, so she was actually in her I think it was her second tour when she went back to Europe, where she joined some of the Impressionists after she was refused. Some of her works were refused at the Salon. She was very angry about that. And she joined the Impressionist exhibitions, and they were doing a couple of independent exhibitions at the time. When I looked at this photo, and again, I know it's watercolor and gouache, but I was very much in doubt whether or not this was ultramarine blue, or was it phthalo blue? And when you start mixing with phthalo, I just remembered that I actually have the green shade, so this will have to do. All right, a little bit of water. Did they use, oh, both blues in that? Oh, that's a really good question. Did they use phthalo blue? See if we can find that. My son is actually learning for his chemistry No, actually. Yeah, you're right. It says here it was first prepared in 1927. So that would be no phthalo blue for Mary. Well, later in her... Ooh. I should have looked that up. That would have made it a lot easier. I'm curious though, because the color, and again, it's, you know, the internet may or may not be messing with me in terms of how does this portrait look in real life. But that blue, to me, of her color looks very phthalo, so that messed me up a little bit. Yeah. The 1930s, exactly. Cool. We're just gonna keep working with with my modern blue. That's gonna make that dress very easy. Look how blue that is. I mean, I love phthalo blue, so... that's very blue. All right, this is gonna be the modern day portrait of Miss Mary. Fun times. So I use acrylic sometimes, very much diluted. I do want to point out though that even though that's great, they don't act like watercolor, right? You can see that here in the pooling. It's not as cool as watercolor. But it is convenient in a way that, you know, when your layers dry... Oh, that's very green. I'm starting to regret my choice here. But let's stick with it. Anyways, what I was saying is when your layers dry, they're dry, so they don't reactivate after put more water on it like they do with watercolors. Alright, well this is definitely going to be an interesting episode with my weird acrylic attempts. It's funny how when you... Oh my lord. I'm not even religious. It's funny how when you work for a while with a certain medium, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. I kind of hope I'm not. But it's almost as if your body kind of adapts to that particular medium, so the way that it moves and the way that it mixes. And I think I've been working with oil paint for a good while now. So I'm a little bit shocked at my complete inability today to handle my acrylics. All right, let's do a little bit for the skin tone. What is this? So the skin tone in this portrait, I think it's quite muted, and I feel like that is part of the impression that she's facing away from the sun, maybe. You get that cool shadow cast, almost. It's actually pretty pink, but I don't want to desaturate it too much because I probably want to go over this, maybe with a transparent layer of white later on. So let's talk a little bit about Mary. I say Cassatt, but maybe she's an American born. So maybe the Americans say Cassatt, I'm not really sure. I did read somewhere that her ancestral name was from a French guy. I think he was named Cassatt, so probably Cassatt, maybe. Anyways, if anyone knows the correct pronunciation, can let me know. Born in America. I have a sort of a newfound interest for American painters. It made me realize when I was researching her. Hi, Linda. It's good to see you here. I hope your appointment went well. So as I was saying, I was reading about American painters. It made me realize how very Eurocentric we are in Europe. I pretty much know very few of them. You know, a couple of the guys, but that's it. So it's interesting. She was like a lot of women who, even though they struggled, like there was a lot of resistance to their choice, especially if they wanted to become professional artists, as opposed to, you know, it being a hobby until you marry. They were all upper middle class, which kind of makes sense because, you know, you needed to travel, you needed stuff and whatnot. So she was as well. And I think I read that her family objected a lot. Like, I think eventually they kind of came around, but yeah, the whole goal for Mary was also to to get married. But Mary did not marry. She actually never got married. And she traveled a lot to France, and she eventually, I think she lived for a long time there. And she was very vocal in her critique of art education, women's rights, the rules of the salon, stuff like that. And I appreciate it. You read about this and you realize that people like her and a lot of other people paved the way for what we now consider normal, which is me doing art on a live stream with a bunch of women. Linda says, I love Mary. Linda, do you know how you pronounce her name in the United States? Because I keep saying Cassatt, but maybe you know a different way. Maybe it's Cassatt. It is colorful for me. Yeah, this is probably one of her least colorful works. I was not feeling brave enough to do one of her favorite works that I know is the little girl in the blue armchair, which if you know kids, that is what a child looks like when she or he is fed up with your formal party, wedding, whatever crap. That is literally how a child looks like. What a child looks like. Ariana says you needed to be like that if you wanted to participate. Yes, absolutely. Cassatt. All right, I was pretty close then. Yeah, no, absolutely. You needed to be yeah, strong in your conviction. I think I read somewhere on the wiki, maybe, I'm not sure, that somebody called her narcissistic. Yes, for being outspoken about her rights to participate. She actually dropped out of the school that she was in France because it was pointless. She said, you know, we're not allowed to do nude drawings, etc. So I'm out, and I think eventually she hired some of the teachers that were in that school to privately tutor her, and this is of course where the need to be upper middle class comes from, because you need money for that. So these women from that class, they made use of their position to, yeah, like I said, to pave the way. All right. I'm also going to absolutely, totally abuse the whole impressionist thing to call this portrait, which is not going too great, an impression of an impression. Let's do the shadow. All right, 10-second break. So my lesson for totally different subject. My lesson for Let's Face It. I think some of you guys know Ariana is in Let's Face It. Came out this week, so I've been on social media for much longer than I usually do. It's fun though. It's always fun when your lesson comes out. But oof, it reminds me again. Like I'm very careful not to be on my phone too much. But when I am on an app, I doom scroll until eternity. So having to be on Facebook, I just literally find myself an hour later thinking, what am I looking at? What am I doing? I'm just scrolling and scrolling. Linda says it's looking good, thank you, thank you. You saw it briefly. Far behind, yeah. I'll be honest with you, I don't participate in Let's Face It. I tried, I think the first year that I was a teacher, I tried to keep up. I quickly realized that that was not going to work. Ariana says, don't we all? It is difficult to resist. It is. Okie dokie, let's try and get this shadow in a little bit. Her facial features are quite sort of limited. All right, I want to work a little bit more on that. So I said acrylics, it dries, so you don't reactivate the underlying layer. There's also a downside, is that you cannot reactivate the underlying layer. It is what it is. So there are pros and there are cons to that. This, like I said, is golden open, so it has a slower drying time. But it definitely does not mix the way that watercolor does. All right, let's try and... I think I may need to take a little bit off the face here. Try and position that. Nope. We have a little bit of time to correct. This is like Tetris. Right, you get a couple of seconds before it sets. This is when I realize how spoiled I've become, in a sense that when you work with oil, I know a lot of people say, oh yeah, acrylic is so forgiving because you know you can just gesso over it, and I'm like, okay, that's very radical. I kind of get it, but the thing with oil, it does not dry for like a whole day. So you know if your eye is not right, you can go take a shower, think about it, you come back and you can still kind of correct all of that. All right. Linda, are you working on paper or canvas? Is it heavy body acrylics? No problem, no problem. I'm working on paper. This is a paper, I haven't shown it, by the way. It's a nice paper. Let's try and not make too much noise. It is an acrylic. Yeah, look, I don't know what they mean by acrylic paper. 400 grams, 190 pounds is quite a lot. So it's very, very heavy. Yeah, so paper. And then I have Golden Open, which is, yeah, they say it's a heavy body, but it's really not. It's more like a normal body. like I said in the beginning, I'm using golden open because I don't have anything else at the moment in these colors. So it's not really like a necessity for this. You can do this with... The one thing I do like, by the way, about the opens is it's currently quite warm, so they don't dry that quickly. All right, let's give this a try. So this is just like a wash or white. And what it does is it not only lightens the area, but it also lowers the chroma. I may have mentioned this in previous live streams, that white, because it has no chroma, right? It's white. If you add it to colors, or like this, if you add it on top of colors, it will lower the chroma of that area. Alrighty. I want to put in a little bit of that gray on the right side. I feel like it's important. Alright. This is harder than it looks. And I'm not sure in which live stream I struggled with exactly the same. I think it was the first one, Gwen John, yeah. You look at a portrait like that and you think, okay, well that does not look too complicated. But I think it's the simple things that are really difficult to capture. And, you know, I see the same thing in, for instance, Dylan's work. Everything is so seemingly simple. And it took me a while, really. Don't worry, I figured it out now. But when I was younger, it really took me a while to realize that in order to capture things with limited things, limited anything, limited strokes, limited lines, limited colors, you need to know what you're doing. You need a lot of expertise and a lot of skill for that. And that's really also one of the reasons why I chose this portrait, because it's really, she has a lot of works that are perhaps like in a French academic way technically more impressive. But for me, this is the stuff of brilliance, you know. Because I'm trying really hard, but my girly hair is looking a bit like meh. I don't know, Sabra. Not sure about this. And I'm gonna say, I don't think that acrylics were the right choice for this at this point. Not really sure if I could pull it off in watercolor either. All right. My girly. That's cool. Yeah, I try and be a little nice to my paintings. You know, step back and I go like, okay, girly, let's talk. I mean, after all, it's not the painting's fault, right? that it's not looking good. Let's put a little shadow in there. Oh, my brush is splaying like mad. I don't know what is wrong with this brush. I probably did something to it. All right, this is really difficult to blend. I should pick up my acrylics more often. It's one of the reasons really why eventually well, I wouldn't say abandon them, I still use them, but that shift that they tend to do, you know, go a little bit darker when they dry, drives me nuts. I mean, like, I already struggle, right? You don't have to make it harder on me. Alrighty. Hi, Tona. I was surprised you weren't using oils. I love it turning out. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, usually it's oils. I would actually love to try this again in oils. Maybe you could do oil on top, maybe, yeah, like part 2. That is the good thing about acrylics. And just put stuff on top of it. This is looking a little bit too wide here. There is this light under her eyes, and it's one of those, what it probably is she has on, I think, a hat of some kind. You can see the what is probably a brim, and what is probably happening is that the light is being reflected off this light thing, this light feature, and then being bounced off her, the underside of her eye socket. And we're almost out of time, so I'm gonna wrap up. But this is really one of the most important, or I think it's one of the most important features of the Impressionists, is that that capture of light. Right? These light effects, but also the passing of light. You can see that that time and light is a moving thing here. Well, in her painting, not mine, but you get where I'm going, right? So these effects are very different from the classic 3/4 side lit portraits that they were used to, they were accustomed to. All right, well, I don't think this is gonna get any better for today. All right, girl. Looking rough, that's fine. So in terms of color, I found it really interesting, so thank you for the question, Ariana, about the phthalo, which is of course an interesting thing to consider when I or you are reading about paintings in the past, and you're thinking, okay, what's the colors they use? So for those who came in late, I thought it was phthalo blue in her dress. It is not, because this portrait was probably painted before 1900. I'm not exactly sure. And phthalo blue was not invented or created until the 1930s, 1972. So interesting. This was originally a watercolor and gouache painting. Maybe something I could try at some point if I'm feeling bold. But oil paint could also be an option. I did, let me show you quickly. I did a study at some point and I didn't realize that it was actually a watercolor and pastel or chalk painting by Susan Robertson, and I did this study of it. And I think halfway in, I was like, why am I struggling, especially with this shadow here, which is light on the inside and then dark on the outside. And I couldn't figure it out. And my dummy brain was like, it must be me. And then I looked at the book and it said watercolor and chalk. And here I was sitting with my oil paint. The fun part was that it kind of forced me to work with the oil paint in a technique that wasn't natural for me, right? So yeah, I might do this in oil, see if we can stretch that medium a little bit. Quick wrap up before we end the live stream. Yellow, blue is complementary, and here this gray, she has a bigger gray area that sort of complements the gray in her face, but it also gives a little bit more chroma to this area here because it is in contrast with the gray. The highest chroma in the face is here at the tip of the ear, and it reinforces the idea that there is a high sun, that it is a sunny day, because the ear, which is semi-translucent, the skin with all the veins, it shines through the ear. If you've ever done that in the sun or with your hands, yeah, let it shine through, you see all these bright pink tints going on. So that's sitting here. The dress, I'm gonna examine a little bit more what color blue she is using. I am now thinking maybe Prussian blue. Yeah, maybe. I'm gonna get back to you on that. My face camera again is here on my palette, so I'm gonna leave it there so you can't see me, but you can see my hands, and I'm saying bye-bye. Thank you for joining. I will try and do another live stream next week, and I hope to see you there. So thank you again for joining me, and see you next week. Bye-bye. Mwah.